What's up, y'all? Ron again. And in this video, we're going to talk about Kepler Exo because it's been long enough, right? Normally, when new FL Studio plugins come out, I try to discuss them as quickly as possible, but I was like, Anyway, this is going to be an unconventional breakdown of how to use Kepler Exo because Kepler Exo is an unconventional plugin. So, for that reason, we're not going to go from the top like this, like we normally would, but we're going to start in the middle. And with each section, there would be sound examples. So this will be more interesting. So beginning in the middle, the reason why we're starting in the middle is because VCA is where the sound comes from. So you're going to notice that you've got this velocity and volume switch. And when you turn it down, it turns the plugin down. On top of this, you've got three sources. So this is created like there are oscillators and the VCA part is the amplifier. So when the source is pointing to environment 1, then the nature of the sound is controlled by environment 1. When it's pointed to gate, it's controlled by this section right here in the arpeggiator. And environment 2 is obviously controlled by environment 2. So in this case, we're starting with a sound that is controlled by environment 1. So this is the kind of sound that you might make using a modification of environment 1. And it is a pluck sound. Another kind of sound that you might make would be in 808s, where you've just got a long decay time, no sustain, and a little bit of release. So these are two examples of the sounds that you might make using environment 1 or environment 2. So I've decided that contrary to what I might normally do, I'm going to do the effects section next. So it starts off with this chorus, which you can always see plainly activated. And this is essentially vintage chorus placed into this plugin. That's one of the things I like about Kepler Exo is that it's got a combination of a bunch of different plugins simply built into it. Similar to how Citrus has the Fruity Reverb 2 built into it. This one has that, and it has a bunch of others. So right here, you've got vintage chorus, and you can tell because it's got the two choruses, and it has the gate, and there's noise for whatever reason. Right here, you've got saturation. So it looks kind of like Fruity Wave Shaper. Here, this is hyper chorus. And you can tell because it's like high core. So that's hyper chorus. This is EQ, but it doesn't have like 7 bands. It only has 3. It's got low, mid, and high. Delay, which you heard on the first sound. And reverb, which is Fruity Reverb 2. So this would clearly be Fruity Delay 3. And I'm not going to go into all of the different ways you use these plugins because that's beyond the scope of this video. So if you're wondering, there are no sounds specific to the effects section because a bunch of the sounds use the different effects on them. For the next section, we are going to be going to the arpeggiator section. And the reason why is because we have envelopes 1 and 2, and we have the gate section. So it only makes logical sense to explain what the gate does next. So the arpeggiator, for those who don't know what an arpeggiator does, it basically makes the note repeat over and over again at whatever rate you set the rate button to. So if you set rate to 16th notes, then this will repeat at the speed of 16th notes. By default, it's set to hertz. And when you enable this, that makes it so that it's quantized. You turn the arpeggiator on and off with this switch. Right here, the range controls how many octaves up it goes. So let's say if you select 3 notes and you don't change anything, then it will just repeat those 3 notes as the 1 octave. If you choose 2 octaves, then it will repeat those 3 notes, and then it will go up an octave, and 3, it'll go up 2 octaves. So it's going to cover the span of 3 octaves from 1 to 3. Next, we've got this section, So if you look in the top left-hand corner, this is the direction that the notes will follow. So by default, it's set to going up. Then you have down, meaning that if the notes are going up, then they will go up the keyboard. If they go up, down, then they will go from the lowest note to the highest note and back to the lowest note, and they'll repeat that way. If they go down, they'll start from the highest note and just go down. And then you have 3 different random sections because FL Studio, they love RNG. They give you choice. Sweet. And then you have these as played. So if you were to just hold down a chord when you use up or down or up down, then it will just go in order. But these as played will actually go in the order that you hold down the keys. So that's pretty cool. And what the gate does is it controls how much the actual sustain of the note will duck. The more that you go down, the more that you decrease the gate level, the more difference you're going to hear pronounced between each note. For example, this is the sound that I created to display this. So we switch this. So you can hear how it goes up and then it goes back down, but it's happening really fast. If I change the rate, so that's pretty cool. With the gate, it takes away the ducking if you move it up. So you might be able to use that for some really cool, like some type of build where the notes just open up and they're not so gated. Yeah, that would be really entertaining. And then you have a beat drop right after. So that concludes this section. So the next section that we're going to be looking at is the modulation matrix, and this does not require a lot of explanation. So on the left, where it says source, you have some parameter control, such as environment 1 or LFO or gate. And destination, whatever destination you set, and you can target pretty much all of them, that source will control it. So here we've got LFO 1 is modulating the rate of LFO 2. So when you look at LFO 2, that's why you see this crazy red like line that's blinking, because that shows that it's being modulated. And when you turn these knobs, then that shows you the amount that they're being modulated. And they're also bipolar, so they can modulate up or down. If you go to B, you've got an extra set of them too. So you can mix and match to see what you like. And the sound that I created for that is essentially a sound that just sounds crazy, that I named Alien Hunting. It's not supposed to sound like pleasant. It's supposed to be something that's weird. So check it out. So what's happening here is that the VCF, which we will cover, this is variable control filter. So that is being modulated by LFO2. But as I explained, LFO2's rate is being modulated by LFO1. So while this is modulating this is modulating this to make a sound that's crazy and unpredictable. And that's how you might use that, to make something that sounds really weird. Or you might use the modulation matrix to just have like LFO1 or environment 1 modulate something else, like the saturation amount. There's a lot of possibility that exists because of this. And it's actually pretty powerful. You can attach stuff to the gate as well. So that's pretty cool. So the next section that we're going to cover is the variable filter, and we're going to cover the LFOs because it just makes sense to me that way. So the most obvious thing right here is the high pass filter, which is going to high pass the sound. The low pass filter is represented by this, and it says frequency rather than low pass. The slope is how much of it you're going to low pass. So when this number is higher, it's going to low pass away more high frequencies. Resonance creates a boost right underneath that filter or around it. And then Over here, you've got it's affected by environment 1. This is up or down. You can control this filter with LFO1, as you see is being done here, LFO2, and it can have keyboard tracking. So that means that as you go up the keys or up the keyboard, then it is going to change the way the filter responds so that the entire sound is not low passed or high passed. Over here, you've got the shape of the filter when it's affected by, say, LFO. And this is frequency modulation, which you can play around with to see how it sounds. When we go to the LFO section, you've got a standard LFO. So you increase the speed of it by increasing this slider. And as with anything that FL Studio has made recently, turning on these red lights quantizes it so that it's set to something like 16th notes rather than hertz. What's cool about these is that you can introduce a delay so that the higher this is, the longer it will actually delay the LFO from coming in. Trigger mode, you can make it so that you affect it manually, or you can have it automatically set when it is going to be triggered. Then you've got the phase, and the phase is if you have a wave cycle, they go from 0 to 180 degrees, and this controls where in that cycle it's going to start. So when you go to the shape of LFO2, it's got all the standard shapes, but it's got random and it's got random plus glide. So when it is set to random, it's going to go from one value to the next randomly, but immediately. And when it's random plus glide, it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to glide from one value to the next. So with that being said, I'm going to show you the sound that I made for this section. And it's really just something simple. It's just the frequency, the low pass filter being controlled by the LFO. And this moves a lot faster if you set it to hertz. So stuff like that is cool and fun. It's good for special effects, and it can be good for making bass that has a lot of warmth to it because it can open up and it feels like it swells, and then the filter can close, and then it's kind of like the same feeling as when there's like a heartbeat. It's hard to describe, but try it for yourself. Make it with bass. It sounds really good. So now we're going to go over all the stuff on the top, starting over here. The most important thing here, change the color. That's pretty cool. So X and Y, you can map different parameters to those in their standard macro controls. You got a volume knob and you got a pan knob. Volume knob is useful because this plugin can get pretty loud since you have the combination of all these oscillators. If you look over here, this will keep it so that the sound is whatever pitch you press when you press a key. This is up an octave, down an octave, and it holds like a sustain pedal. So then we go to DCO1, DCO2. DCO stands for digitally controlled oscillator. So as you see, you can have LFO1 and LFO2 enabled. And I just want to point out that that's a really cool thing about this plugin. So rather than you have to route everything to LFO1, all the sections are already set up to do it by default. So you can just adjust the sliders without having to go through the hassle of all of that. But it's confusing at first because it can be confusing of like how you affect the sound since it really starts here primarily. But when you have these DCOs, you got LFO1, LFO2, environment 2 is the default for these because presumably you will use environment 1 to control the entire sound. So that's why we started here with the environment 1. Environment 2, they expect for you to use environment 2 to control these to manipulate the nature of the sound, but environment 1 determines how the overall sound will be, at least in their workflow. So that explains the order of why we're going in this order. So here you've got a pulse width, and this is pulse width modulation. So it's like a square wave, but if you know anything about the polarity of or wave shaping, then a square wave is at its maximum for some time, for half of the time in this cycle, and then it's at the minimum for the other half of the time. So this changes how long the maximum and minimum are. When this is high, it's going to be smoother sounds. When it's low, it's going to be brighter, more percussive sounds, because doing that changes the harmonics. But for our purpose, when you attach this to an LFO, because you've got 3 different modulation sources, you've got LFO1, you can do it manually, or you've got environment 1. A lot of the time, it sounds like a change in pitch. This is the regular oscillator that stays on all the time by default. As you can see over here, these two, you have to turn them on. And when it defaults, DCO1 is on by itself. To turn on DCO2, you have to go here. And DCO2 has the same controls. Right here, you've got a sub oscillator. So it is 1 octave below whatever note is being pressed. And it basically adds bass. Here you can control the phase of it. And in the middle, these 2 oscillators will frequency modulate each other. The manual doesn't say too much about it, but you can change the shape. So it's one of those set to taste type of things. But in general, frequency modulation will also add richness of harmonics, but it could also add harmonics that are uneven, so they can sound really dissonant. But that also can be cool. It can be really fun. DCO2, it's got a few extra features. So you can see that it's got the subphase still, and this is like raising the volume of the sub. But then you've got these detuning features, so you can change it by semitones, or you can just have it be detuned here. Because if you hard sync, then whenever the first oscillator restarts, it forces the second oscillator to retrigger, and that creates harmonics as well. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in terms of sound design from up here. So then you've got the mixer. So in theory, you can adjust these faders so that one of them is lower. So for example, one of them can just be adding upper harmonics, and the other one can have the main body of the sound. So there's a lot of stuff you can do given all the harmonically rich content that is here to be created based upon the controls that you choose. You can add noise, and you can have AM synthesis. So one of them will affect the other, and it'll be amplitude modulation, which also is good for adding harmonics. So we're going to look at the 2 sounds that I created for these 2 sections, because there's 2 of them. So first, you got this one. Which is more of a cinematic sounding pluck type of sound. It kind of sounds like a horn that's in a room with a lot of reverb. And then you have cinematic bass, which it adds noise to it. You can see that DCO2 is turned on and the arpeggiator is active. And this is designed to be the type of sound that if you were watching a movie, it gives you the feeling that something is chasing you. So in making this sound, I really tried to use every single parameter that I could. So there's DCO2, you can see it's pitched down an octave from whatever is pressed. The arpeggiator is on. You've got environment 1 affecting the cutoff. And you've got some saturation. There's EQ to increase the mids. And the chorus is active. But there's no reverb because I intended it to be sort of like a bass sound. Yeah. And so the final thing, the final sound that's here is just one that's made of noise with no oscillators. They just have noise. And I set the noise to be random and to be modulated. So It sounds like broken static from a messed up television. And I hope that makes sense for demonstrating the wealth of sounds that you can get out of this plugin. So this final section is one that I don't use too much, and I kind of forgot about it for that reason, but we're going to cover it anyway. So it's portamento. And what portamento means is that you hold a note or you press a note, and then when you press the next note, it glides to that note instead of going straight to that note and stopping the other one. So when you go to this section, you would activate it by pressing mono, pressing legato, increasing portamento. And the difference between mono and legato is that in terms of this, mono only allows one note to be sounding at a time, and legato will still allow you to play multiple notes even though it still has the portamento happen. The difference between exponential and linear is that exponential will happen quickly, and linear, it will be the same speed that the portamento will be no matter what. You control the length of the portamento by adjusting this. You can see how these two, they become active when you press mono. And what retrigger does is that every time when you press a new note, it retriggers the envelopes. So let's say if you attach the filter to an envelope, like what I did here, then every time you hit a new note, it's going to glide to that note and the envelope will activate adjusting the filter again. So we're just going to look at that real quick. So what I did is filters on LFO1. But you can hear how the portamento is already present. Mono, turn these off. So that's with the portamento turned off. I just press 3 notes and it only allows for one voice at a time. If I increase this and then press 3 notes, so you can see how it's linear and they take the same amount of time. Exponential. Happens really fast. When I retrigger, so you can see each time I press a new note, the filter is affected. So the envelope triggers the filter again. Release is just straightforwardly not labeled what it does in the manual, as far as I can tell. And as I said, legato allows the same thing, but it allows for it to happen with multiple voices. So you can hear that there's still that gliding sound, even though there's more than one note. Yeah, so that's what it does. I decided to play around with this real quick so that I could explain it. And this button triggers the LFOs. So with that being said, that's the end of this. And if you're on the Image Line forums, I'll be giving these sounds away as a project. So thanks for watching. Peace.